Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Podcast Daily. It is Tuesday, and that is Bill Landis, and I am Austin Ward. And guess what? We're not done talking about Kevin Warren. What?
I thought I was pretty certain we were, but turns out we're not.
I mean, this story, Bill, all I can think of is that it's bonkers.
It's weird. I have a few different trains of thought on the story. I guess we should say what story we're talking about. From Pete Thamel of ESPN on Sunday reported that the Big Ten media deal is not all the way done, and Kevin Warren kind of left them hanging and left out some finer points of the deal that are going to cost the Big Ten a little bit of scratch here as they try to get it finalized. And maybe I don't know what I guess I'll ask you what was the most surprising thing you saw in there? I guess aside from the entirety of the thing being surprising, what was the one thing in there that we were like, oh boy, that's not good?
Yeah, I felt like every new paragraph brought eye-opening information. If you haven't read the story, it's pretty important, not just because it's crazy and Kevin Warren's been something of a punchline. And if you want to pile on one last time as he leaves behind this a little bit of a mess, at least financially, short-term pain, maybe for long-term gain, we could even say, in the best case scenario for him. But the details in here are important for also understanding the way that the broadcast partners and the kickoff times are going to be structured moving forward. So a week ago, when we were just talking about playing November night games and this is the new reality, there wasn't an understanding of Ohio State had not changed its tolerance or willingness necessarily to play them against a team like Michigan State in mid-November, but it was volunteering to do so in this instance because the league was staring down a $70 million fine, right? Or not fine, a payment to make up for what had gone unnoticed or untalked about or unbothered by in Kevin Warren with his and the league's negotiations with NBC, CBS, and with Big Brother Fox overlooking all of that. You say there's lots of trains of thought. There are. There's so many weird things that are in this, but the first thing that jumped out to me was because we had talked so much about Ohio State, Michigan State in primetime in November, was the fact that Ohio State was not suddenly jumping at the opportunity to play these games, but that was basically compelled to do so for the benefit of the rest of the league.
And Ohio State's done that before, right? They have made concessions, I guess, against its own desires to help out the league, and whether you like it or not, probably has to do that sometimes, I think, because of the flag that it carries for the Big Ten. Now, I guess the idea is that USC in particular can help bear some of that burden moving forward, but I guess it does. I was thankful, I suppose, to understand a little more about how that came to be, because I was surprised by it. Penn State is doing the same. Penn State's playing is it also Michigan State on Black Friday?
Yes.
Which was not previously announced, so they're kind of doing the same thing. So Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State. So somehow NBC did not know that the Big Ten didn't want to play night games in November, and Kevin Warren either knew it and chose to ignore it, or also didn't know it. We knew that. So that's the part of me that was a little confused. I was like, how did it get to that point? Because it was fairly well known, I thought, that the Big Ten did not do this, which is why it was such a shock to see them pop up all of a sudden on the calendar for next year. So that part was strange to me. But yeah, it is the Ohio State portion of this is the Buckeyes are playing ball with the Big Ten to help them get this deal with NBC across the finish line, because it was sort of botched from the start by Kevin Warren, and the Big Ten does not want to lose even more money on top of the $40 million that it's going to have to pay, apparently, because Kevin Warren gave the Big Ten title game to NBC without asking anybody if he could do that first. And then also some additional millions dating back to the loss of revenue from the 2020 season.
I think giving away the Big Ten title game is up there with the most incompetent part of this, I think.
Yeah.
Because there's other things all right, we've finished 95% of this deal. Here's what the amount's going to be. Here's the broadcast windows that you're going to do. That doesn't, you can announce some of that before these long form contracts are completed. you want to celebrate, and you don't think that there's going to be any hangups on that part. Although there are for the Big Ten's case, because it's not just if it's cold at 7:30. Somebody mentioned this the other day. So what's the big deal? If it's November, it's going to be just as cold when you kick off at noon as it is at 7:30. The resistance for Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, Wisconsin is not necessarily that it's too cold for the players. It's that those games are ending at midnight and you have to have redcoats and police and traffic and everything else with potentially dangerous weather at that time at midnight, as opposed to more manageable from 4 to 6. So when we talk about these logistics for November, it is not, these tolerances are not just about, can a player go play at 7:30 on a Saturday night in November? Yes, they can. But the logistics of putting on the game are what become far more complicated as the weather gets worse. Yes, NFL teams do it all the time. Yes, you could winterize Ohio Stadium. Yes, they'll be able to probably pull this game off, and maybe there won't be any hitches at all against Michigan State. But that's why this is all built into that deal. So it is staggering that they didn't think that last 5% of the long-form deal, or whatever percentage you want to put on it, that there were going to be no hangups, because if they didn't even know what they were agreeing to, which it says in Pete Thamel's story that the athletic directors were not consulted on this part, that's a huge problem. And I don't think it's going to cause the deal to be scrapped, but it is difficult to complete it at this point.
I think there's far too much money at stake for it not to be completed. It'll probably look a little different. So to get into some of the bullet points, I guess the sub bullet points of what Pete reported, like, I think the thing that maybe resonates most with me is the stunning lack of communication, which I think was, we kind of figured it was operating that way for a couple of years based off how 2020 went. But this was a little more, I think, maybe even clear for me, made more clear for me with Pete's reporting that, like, to orchestrate something this large, this important, this lucrative, with seemingly without keeping like key stakeholders in the loop along the way is a little odd to me. And that's not even to say that football coaches, especially, like, if they want to be kept in the loop, that's fine. I don't really think they should have a seat at the table when actually making decisions. Like, they're not TV executives. That's not what they do. Mm-hmm. Ryan Day doesn't ask Gene Smith and Kevin Warren what he should run on third down. Like, that's not like why that part bothered me a little bit. Like with Tom Izzo saying, like, oh, we were never consulted on this. Like, you're a basketball coach. you don't need to be consulted on it. Just play when they tell you to play. And the same thing for football coaches. But like athletic directors, I think it's a different thing. Like their job title is different. And if they're not involved in those decisions or told about them after the fact, that's obviously not okay. I don't know. I don't come away from it thinking like this is ultimately all that damaging to the Big Ten, with like, because you think about the dollar amounts, like let's say it's $40 million for the Big Ten title game. It's $25 million for the stuff from 2020. And there was a reference to like other tens of millions of dollars. Like, you're still talking about like 1% of a $7 billion TV contract. I think they'll be okay. But I think it speaks to the larger issue that like the Big Ten as a whole probably needs to be in better lockstep than it has been over the last few years when it's making these large decisions.
I think you're forgetting that Tom Izzo is the athletic director and president at Michigan State.
That is true. His situation is unique. I'm trying to think if does that dynamic exist anywhere else in the Big Ten? Because even like at Ohio State, for as big and powerful as Ohio State football is, like, it still feels like it's Gene Smith's show. It does not feel that way at Michigan State.
His name is now on the football practice building. Yeah. What in the world? The only other one that is like that is where Kirk Ferentz has more power than Gary Barta at Iowa.
Oh, yeah. He has more power than God in Iowa.
So those two guys obviously had to be consulted and clearly were not. It is interesting from the Ohio State side. They're going to be the ones almost always most impacted here. They are the most influential school in the league. That both Chris Holtmann and Ryan Day were quoted in the story by Pete Thamel, and not in the most glowing terms for different reasons. Like, I don't think that Ryan Day particularly cares that much if you have to play November night games, although it is an inconvenience if you say that you don't want to do so because of the benefit or because of the things that I outlined for your university as a whole. Chris Holtmann's point of view and Tom Izzo's was that all these games are going to be on streaming, which we did know Like that was part of the grand unveiling. Whatever it's going to be, 50 to 70 games are going to be on the cock, and that's, I mean, that part wasn't a surprise.
Yeah,
it's not great. I don't think people want that, but that's the part that basketball teams are upset about.
Yeah, I guess I don't know. At the risk of sounding uninformed about the viewing habits of college basketball fans, I don't know that matters all that much because I think the important games when people are paying attention are still going to be like on CBS on the weekend afternoons. So what else are you worried about? And also too, like, I don't know, are you worried about visibility? If you're worried about visibility with recruits, like that is the age group that it's normal to be watching things on Peacock and Amazon and Hulu and all those things. Like they don't, it'd be more strange for them. I think they have to go try to find it on terrestrial networks every week. So I don't understand that gripe other than, like, as I said before, like if you want to be kept in the loop of what's happening so that you're not blindsided by things, I totally understand that. It's not always the way it works. Like I'm sure you and I have both worked at places where things have happened above us and then we don't know about them until after they've been decided. And you're just like, what the hell was that? Like when did you decide to do this and why is it happening? So if as much as you can avoid that, I think it's important, but I don't need Tom Izzo at the table telling me what time his Spartans need to be playing ball games and on what networks. Like that's out of his purview, in my opinion.
Yeah. Bob Iger didn't like round up the 100 reporters at ESPN that were laid off without warning and be like,
yeah,
you know what? We could keep all of you, or we could keep one Stephen A. Smith. And we would have been like, yeah, it's 100 votes to 1. Keep us.
Yeah.
We weren't allowed to have a say in that because ESPN, like Fox and Amazon and ABC or ABC, sorry, they're part of this already. But, you know, Big Ten Network, they made those decisions for billions of dollars. So our opinions didn't matter and we weren't going to be able to change it. The same is true for even very powerful football coaches and basketball coaches when it comes to $7 billion.
What kind of position? Like I've had no interaction with Tony Petitti, the new Big Ten commissioner. I don't.
You didn't jump on a Friday night press conference?
I sure didn't. I sure didn't. You know why? Because no one cares. But I don't really know much about him, but that he is left to, and like this is a mess. Like the extent to which it's a mess, I think has been maybe a little overstated, but it is a mess nonetheless. What kind of position do you think this puts him in as he tries to like piece this together, get this across the finish line, but then also reestablish some trust, I think, from the commissioner's office down through the AD and the coaching ranks?
In some ways, it kind of makes more sense why he was targeted and hired, because this is a concern. The amount of money is almost imperative for the future of the Big Ten and the way that they're trying to build the league moving forward and sustain it. So you'd think, well, why do you need someone with television exec backgrounds to come be the athletic director for your league? That is sort of the trendy new thing, especially if the Big Ten was already done by Kevin Warren. Like, why do you need that? This is somebody who can potentially bridge all of that gap. And I think that maybe makes him a better fit in hindsight than I would have thought the day that he was announced. Like maybe he can patch some of this up, and it's going to continue to be part of his job basically forever, because of the other major detail in the story that many of us did not know or had not reported previously, which was that the Big Ten Network owns everyone's television rights.
Yeah.
Seemingly forever. I don't.
That was, yeah, it was like they own it until to an undisclosed date, but it is at least the end of this new TV deal. So yeah, in perpetuity is how I took it.
Yeah, till the last living descendant of King Henry VIII dies. Yeah, that becomes a key part of every conversation, because the Big Ten Network, and then by extension Fox, is involved in every decision related to broadcasting any Big Ten sport. That is insane to me. And I can't imagine is fun for NBC or CBS. That's also why the game is probably never going to be anything other than Big Noon Kickoff or every other Ohio State Penn State game, like, because they control the purse strings as well. Fox does.
Yeah, that was my biggest takeaway from that. It was like, obviously, like Fox has like the most important seat at the table. I think we all just like assumed that. We didn't know they owned the table. That is, yeah. If there's ever any doubt about like what channel is this big game going to be on, like it's Fox. It's on Fox. Unless they're feeling incredibly generous. I think every game of importance in the Big Ten is going to be on Fox, I guess, with the exception of the Big Ten title game that Kevin Warren gave away that he wasn't allowed to.
Yeah, and so then they've got to bring in the peacemaker Petiti to be like, who's going to go tell our actual bosses that this was given away? Like, how did that happen? Kevin Warren obviously knew that Fox and the Big Ten Network owned all the inventory. He just thought they'd be okay giving it away, one of their marquee games of the season.
Maybe he thought, like, clearly there are people who think that Kevin Warren is a good businessman because he's leaving the Big Ten to go position himself to be Roger Goodell's successor, I guess.
Good luck.
Yeah, but I guess, like, is the thought process, I'm just going to do this, and by the time people figure it out, it's going to be too late. And if this was a concession that needs to be made to get the $7 billion deal across the finish line, then everyone will just deal with it. If that was the rationale, then on some level, I guess I respect the ruthlessness of it. But it mostly just kind of feels like ineptitude. So I don't know how that came to be. I think they'll figure it out because, as you said, like this feels like a minor concession for a much larger gain for everybody involved. And if I guess in the process they can talk to Pete Thamel and kick Kevin Warren in the butt on his way out the door, because there's a lot of people I think at the Big Ten that aren't particularly fond of him, then all the better. And it also helps Tony Petiti too. Like if things get a little wonky, like he now has a reason to say like, hey, this is why it happened. So it's weird. It's very odd. I don't think it is like a bombshell, but it's strange.
The only reason I think that it's maybe more bombshellish than that's definitely a word, don't look it up, is that if you're trying to solve this dilemma now of NBC needing games in November at 7:30 and traditional Big Ten teams are not going to host them, well, that means USC and UCLA have to have maybe an extra amount of home games so that you can fill that on the West Coast where you don't have this issue.
Yeah.
But you can't have them exclusively playing at home in November. So in some ways, this makes me think that we are closer to Oregon, Washington expansion than, kicking it down the road, because now they suddenly have a different problem that they maybe didn't anticipate that they could solve in a way that they were already considering. That's
interesting. I had not considered that, but I think maybe you're right. I think we all kind of think it's going to end up there anyway eventually. It felt less imminent like, I don't know, 2 days ago. but maybe this adds a little fuel to that potentially. I had not considered that, but you're right, because like you're not gonna, if the options are like Ohio State and Michigan and Penn State are only going to play ball so much and not want to do this all the time, and like I'm sure that, I don't know, maybe Purdue would love a primetime slot in November, but I don't think NBC would love to just keep throwing Purdue out there in primetime in November. So the solution then is probably to get a little more West Coast with your footprint so that you can account for that.
Yeah. Seems like that's where we're headed. But it's nice that we get one more gift from Kevin Warren just when we thought we were never going to have to talk about that era again, and that maybe it's ending on a high note. The money's coming in. USC and UCLA are on the way, although USC's athletic director is also on the way out.
Mm-hmm.
That's a fun bit of turmoil as well to add to this beautiful package that keeps growing even beyond. You get this, and it's maybe it isn't a big deal. You might be right about that, because it's probably safe to assume that with this much money at stake, everyone will eventually sing Kumbaya and shake hands and move forward. Like, that's probably correct. But there are things that will influence and impact the viewing experience and the stadium experience for fans. And they may not like it. They may not. I don't know. I won't speak for them. But it's going to be difficult for people to work that out.
I think there will be changes, no doubt. I think sports fans, over time have shown themselves fairly adaptable to those kind of things. Like college football is not the only league to make significant changes like this. So I think it'll be weird at the start. And I also too like Kevin Warren's tenure as Big Ten commissioner is complicated, and this complicates it even more so. But like he still helped them get USC and UCLA, and he still got them, albeit in a very clunky way, a incredibly lucrative television contract that is going to, I think, then fold into another incredibly lucrative big television contract when this one expires. So the results, I think, will be good. The process maybe was not the best.
The Kevin Warren experience.
That's right.
In a nutshell. All right. I promise we'll get back to more football definitely tomorrow. Bill's got a couple stories already on the offensive line, interior, and at tackle. So we'll break those up and dive into those over the next couple days on the podcast daily to get back into some actual offseason football talk. But the story was bonkers, as I said, and I thought that we needed to at least dive into that a little bit more. It does help provide some context for what Ohio State is willing to do to help the Big Ten and itself, of course, because it's part of that and needs that money as well, or wants it, however you want to put it. Either way, appreciate you joining us on the podcast daily for your Tuesday. We will be back again tomorrow to talk about some linemen. It'll be a holiday for Bill the next couple of days. For Bill, I'm Austin. Thanks again for joining us. We'll talk to you later.